morning. Welcome to Second Unitarian Church. I'm Sue Burke, a member of the Library Committee and a member of the Board of Trustees, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And my headband is from last night's fall fundraiser, which was a lot of fun and a big success. Today, we are in person here at the 2U Sanctuary and at the Admiral and via Zoom, and we ask everyone's indulgence for the complications of a three-part service. We're glad you're here, however you manage to attend. When we would traditionally sing together and read things in unison, you're encouraged to do so as well, even though you're master on mute. Our voices echo through the world, so we will hear each other if we listen closely and sing with our full spirit. We're paying close attention to COVID recommendations, and for now, we recognize that masking during the service is an act of love and protection. We welcome newcomers and visitors this morning. Finding a new community and making new connections can be challenging, and please know that we're excited to have you and look forward to getting to know you. If you're new to us today, please note that in the Zoom chat or mention it in person during the conversation after the service. If you'd like, there are blue mugs you can use to signal to others that you'd like them to come up and say hello. Our worship today is led by Janice Stashwick, a member of 2U for 13 years. She's a founding member and co-leader of 2U's pagan ministry, Coves, Covenant of Earth and Sky, a CUPS chapter. Janice has also served as a hospital chaplain for 6 years, trained at Rush Hospital in Chicago. She's also certified by the International End-of-Life Doula Association. Music this morning is provided by Siobhan Walker, Just Vote, and George Cedarquist. Our time together requires a large group of people who make possible the worship, the music, and the technical production. They're listed in the order of service, and we thank them for their ongoing service to our congregation. You can find more information and additional announcements in your order of service. But first, let me say a few words about as a member of the Library Committee, because on the last Sunday of each month, we highlight a committee. Now, there's 3 things you should know. First, our church has a library. It has more than 2,400 books and materials, and you can find it in the lower level across from Reverend Jason's office. Second, you can access the library catalog from the internet through the 2U website. Just choose About, then scroll down to 2U Library, and you can look things up by subject, author, and title. And third, you can access the library in person on the 2nd and 4th Sunday of every month when you can peruse the shelves at your leisure. But if for any reason you can't get there in person, contact Jill Alfage right here, and she'll be your book runner. Our committee members are Jill, Don McGregor, Berlinda Brown, Nana Cross, Lou Harding, and I. Lou Harding builds things like the little library out front and the new children's bookshelves. We've got lots of kids' books. And through a program of the Chicago Public Library, we are now a book sanctuary, which means we have committed to keeping and discussing and circulating banned books like Heather Has Two Mommies, The Hate You Give, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, and just donated today, Mouse. The library is managing snacks today after services and Ask Us Anything. I now welcome Jill Alfage to lead our call to worship. Oh. You have an announcement?
A live announcement. Come
on.
Well,
make your
Come
announcement.
on down.
No silly things. I just wanted to tell you that next Sunday after church, we are going to have a town hall to talk about the Capitol campaign. And we have exciting news for you. So make sure that you plan to stay afterwards next Sunday. Okay? Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. So many things happening here. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a community of children, youth, and adults, a people of many beliefs and traditions, bound not by a specific list of things we believe, but the values we share. Whether you are joining us for the first time or for the 1,000th time, like me, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God some of the time, all of the time, or none of the time, you are still welcome here. Whatever your race, whomever you love, whichever way you move in the world, however much money is in your pocket, you are welcome here. I invite you, when you feel ready, to breathe in and out. As the music begins, let us enter into our service together.
In just a moment, Daniel on Zoom, Jill in the sanctuary, and Harris at the Admiral will light our chalices, the symbol of our faith. And we light our chalices this morning with these words: Universal mystery, guide us away from the desire to shine light in all the corners. Teach us to embrace the night, for without the darkness, we never see the stars. Would you light our chalices, please?
and join me in singing our opening hymn, number 1010, We Give Thanks.
We covenant to build a community that challenges us to grow and empowers us to honor the truth within ourselves. We will be generous with our gift and honest in our communication, holding faithful to a love that embraces both diversity and conflict. By our living tradition, we will nurture spirituality within a vision of the eternal. Will nurture spirituality.
Please join our civil response, Spirit of Life. Our story this morning is called Badger's Parting Gifts. So just a note, the bouncy house is still ours for today, so I will be turning it on at 11:45, should anyone need a little bounce in their life. Badger was dependable, reliable, and always ready to help when help was needed. He was also very old, and he knew almost everything. Badger was so old that he knew he must soon die. Badger wasn't afraid of death. Dying meant only that he would leave his body behind, and as his body didn't work so well as it had in days gone by, Badger wasn't too concerned about that. His only worry was how his friends would feel when he was gone. Hoping to prepare them, Badger had told them that someday soon he would be going down the long tunnel, and he hoped they wouldn't be too sad when it happened. One day, as Badger was watching Mole and Frog race down the hillside, he felt especially old and tired.
He wished more than anything that he could run with them, but he knew his old legs wouldn't let him. He watched Mole and Frog for a long time, enjoying the sight of his friends having a good time. It was late when he arrived home. He wished the moon good night and closed the curtains on the cold world outside. He made his way slowly down to the warm fire that was waiting for him deep underground. He had his supper and then sat down at his desk to write a letter. When he had finished, he settled down in his rocking chair by the fire. He gently rocked himself to and fro, and soon was fast asleep, having a strange yet wonderful dream like none he'd had ever before. Much to Badger's surprise, he was running. Ahead of him was a very long tunnel. His legs felt strong and sure as he ran toward it. He no longer needed his walking stick, so he left it lying on the floor of the tunnel. Badger moved swiftly, running faster and faster through the long passageway until his paws no longer touched the earth. He felt himself turning end over end, tumbling and falling, but nothing hurt. He felt free. It was as if he had fallen out of his body. The next day, Badger's friends gathered anxiously outside Badger's door. They were worried because he hadn't come out to say good morning as he always did. Fox broke the sad news that Badger was dead and read Badger's note to them. It said simply, "Gone down the long tunnel. Bye-bye, Badger." All the animals had loved Badger, and everyone was very sad. Mole especially felt lost, alone, and desperately unhappy. In bed that night, Mole could only think of Badger. Tears rolled down his velvety nose, soaking the blankets he clung to for comfort. Outside, it had begun to snow. Winter had begun, and soon a thick layer of snow hid the animals' homes where they would stay snug and warm during the cold months. The snow covered the countryside, but it didn't conceal the sadness that Badger's friends felt. Badger had always been there when anyone needed him. The animals all wondered what they would do now that he was gone. Badger had told them not to be unhappy, but it was hard not to be. As spring drew near, the animals often visited each other and talked about the days when Badger was alive. Mole was good at using scissors, and he told about the time Badger had taught him how to cut out a chain of moles from a piece of folded paper. Paper moles had littered the ground that day. Mole remembered the joy he had felt when he had finally succeeded in making a complete chain of moles with all the paws joined. Frog was an excellent skater. He recalled how Badger had helped him take his first slippery steps on the ice. Badger had gently guided him across the ice until he had gained enough confidence to glide out on his own. Fox remembered how, when he was a young cub, he could never knot his tie properly until Badger showed him how. Starting with the wide end of the tie, it's right over left, once around to the back, then down through the crossover, and holding the back of the tie, push the knot up to the neck. Fox could now tie every knot ever invented, and some he'd made up himself. And of course, his own necktie was always perfectly knotted. Badger had given Mrs. Rabbit his special recipe for gingerbread and had shown her how to bake gingerbread rabbits. Mrs. Rabbit was well known throughout the countryside for her excellent cooking. As she talked about her first cooking lesson with Badger so long ago, she could almost smell the wonderful fragrance of gingerbread fresh from the oven. Each of the animals had a special memory of Badger, something he had taught to them that they could now do extremely well. He had given them each something to treasure, a parting gift that would become all the more special each time it was passed on to the others. As the last of the snow melted, so did the animals' sadness. Whenever Badger's name was mentioned, someone remembered another story that made them all smile. One warm spring day, as Mole was walking on the hillside where he'd last seen Badger, he wanted to thank his friend for his parting gift. "Thank you, Badger," he said softly, believing that Badger would hear him. And somehow, Badger did. That is the end of our story this morning. Please join me in singing our children out to their crafting experience.
Each year, we all make a commitment, a pledge to support the ministry of our church. In addition to this contribution, each Sunday we take a collection so that we can share with those doing justice beyond our community. We are unable to all come together in person. You can still share your resources. To make your contributions, you can go to our website, or you can send a text to the number on the screen. Hopefully it'll come up. Or in the sanctuary, you can put your donation in the box at the back. For the month of October, we are sharing our plate with Shy Nations Youth Council. I'm not sure, but it says that we're going to hear some words about the library committee, but I think we may already have. So take it away, Sue or Jill.
Stay afterwards. Will you join me with the offertory words, which should be coming soon? They're also in your order of service. This church is the community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm it and enable its participation in the larger world around us. The offertory will now be generously given and very gratefully received.
Hello, Sanctuary.
Working on it. I couldn't see it. I could not see it in the sanctuary because the projector's not on.
Oh,
So I just went over to turn the projector on.
I invite you now into the spirit of prayer and meditation. First, though, I would like us to hold up the families of the many people in Korea who died during the Halloween celebration stampede, and to pray that the Halloween celebrations that we have here will be peaceful and joyful. Let us now start by breathing together. Take a breath in and out. As we gather together, may we remember the sacredness of this time and space when we share with each other what is most important to us. That is where the listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say that your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you shelter, that is where love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. When we experience the full presence of each other because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this be a space where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. I invite you now to speak the name of anyone you wish to lift up into loving our support of this community. And with our deepest compassion, let us hold in our hearts those named and unnamed, those remembered and those forgotten. Blessed be. Amen. During our ritual of lighting candles for our joys and concerns, we want to continue to maintain our safety with each other. In the 2U sanctuary, you are invited to come forward to light a candle. And as you end your time of contemplation and candle lighting, we invite you to use the hand sanitizer as available. For those of us at the Admiral, I invite you to come forward and take a pebble from one bowl, hold it tight, tightly, putting your energy into the stone, and then knowing your joys and sorrows to be shared by this community, let it go lightly into the bowl. And for those of us attending on Zoom, I invite you to share your joys and concerns in the chat window. Jill will now light 2 candles in the 2U sanctuary, one representing all unspoken joys and another for unspoken sorrows. Please come forward. As you feel called. We hold all of these joys, celebrations, sorrows, and struggles close to our hearts. I invite Jill now to share our first reading.
Our first reading is an excerpt from Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. Looking mortality straight in the eye is no easy feat. To avoid the exercise, we choose to stay blindfolded in the dark as to the realities of death and dying. But ignorance is not bliss, only a deeper kind of terror. We can do our best to push death to the margins, keeping corpses behind stainless steel doors and tucking the sick and dying in hospital rooms. So masterfully do we hide that you would almost believe that we were the first generation of immortals. But we are not. We are all going to die, and we know it. The fear of death is why we build cathedrals, have children, declare war, and watch cat videos online at 3 a.m. Death drives every creative and destructive impulse we have as human beings. The closer we come to understanding it, the closer we come to understanding ourselves. Death might appear to destroy the meaning in our lives, but in fact, it is the very source of our creativity. As Kafka said, the meaning of life is that it ends. Death is the engine that keeps us running, giving us the motivation to achieve, learn, love, and create. Philosophers have proclaimed this for thousands of years just as vehemently as we insist upon ignoring it, generation after generation. The great achievements of humanity were born out of the deadlines imposed by death.
Our second reading this morning is from Some 40 Tales from the Afterlives by David Eagleman, or Eagleman. I'm getting an echo over Zoom, so maybe we can fix that. There are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when the body is consigned to the grave. And the third is that moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. I'm sorry. That's it. I think we'll hear our anthem now. Is it bad?
It's good.
Thank you so much for that music. Help me get through this without breaking down again. This was not an easy sermon to write. And it may not be an easy sermon to hear. Death. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. But death touches us all. And in the last few years, it has touched many of us in sudden and unexpected ways. Shh. Death is a strangely taboo subject, and yet so much a part of our shared culture. In North America, we trivialize it in ghost stories such as Beetlejuice. We dress it up in Halloween costumes. We sanitize it in medical facilities and impersonal funeral homes. We ritualize it in ceremonies and memorial services. We fear it, but we never really talk about it. Americans have been so afraid of death that during the pandemic, we as a culture had been willing to sacrifice anything to keep it at bay. We shuttered businesses and schools, deprived children of meaningful education, important milestones, and most importantly, human contact. As a culture, we try to banish death from modern society, but instead we've only chosen to ignore it. And having ignored it, we no longer knew how to handle it. The next few days are all about death. This is the time when darkness begins to overcome light, when the damp chill and wind begins to cut through to the bone, even though the temperatures may still be sometimes moderate. It is the time of the ancient holy days, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, as well as the Christian Halloween, All Hallows Eve, and All Saints Day. Samhain, also known as the pagan New Year, is a celebration of the final harvest and of ushering in the dark side of the wheel of the year. Samhain coincides with the end of the growing season. Vegetation dies all around us, and literally, death is in the air. Observed on the evening of October 31st, pagans believe that the veil between the living and the dead is especially thin that night. This allows spirits of the dead to visit the living. Samhain is a time to honor our ancestors. We cast a circle and often tell stories of our loved ones who have died, human and pet. For those who have lost loved ones in the past year, Samhain rituals can be an opportunity to bring closure to their grieving. Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is a two-day holiday that exchanges sadness and mourning for celebrations with grand parades and decorations and traditions that reunite the living and the dead. According to tradition, the gates of heaven are opened at midnight on October 31st, and the spirits of the children can rejoin their families for 24 hours. The spirits of the adults do the same thing on November 2nd. The holiday is Aztec in origin. Technically pagan, it was originally held in the summer, but it was Christianized by the Spanish conquerors and moved to correspond with All Saints Day on November 1st. All Saints Day is a Christian festival for honoring the saints, both those recognized by the church and those known only by God. Christians observe All Saints Day by going to church, visiting, and decorating graves. Catholics elevate that day by making it a holy day of obligation where attendance at Mass is mandatory. Tradition asked people to refrain from unnecessary work in special respect to the saints, and to particularly thank them for their service and commitment to their faith. So whether you believe in heaven and hell, Valhalla, Nirvana, or that we simply cease to exist on earth when we die, death is a transition, a change from this existence to something else. I don't know what happens when or after we die. What I do know, though, is that our essence, we are energy, and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Once our mortal bodies cease to function, that energy, that spirit, that soul, whatever it is, it does something. It exists somewhere. Death is the great gift. We are forced to live knowing our mortality. In reality, it is knowing that we will die that gives our lives meaning. It's our motivation to be present in our lives now. More profoundly, as we are reminded of our own mortality, we may contemplate what comes after, to seek to know the secret of death. Mortality is part of our direct experience of being human. Life after death is also part of our human consciousness. We write books and songs and plays and movies about it. The idea of an afterlife is all around us. As a culture, we believe our energy survives death. In some Native American tribes and cultures, the dead are not considered to have passed away. They instead walk on. For them, death is the continuation of a journey rather than an endpoint. Excuse me. Pagans believe many things about the afterlife. We are a diverse group from various traditions. Some believe in an actual place, such as Valhalla or Summerland. Others are earth-centered and believe we go back to the earth. I want to share with you what I believe. This excerpt from David Eagleman's book expresses it well. In the moment of transition between life and death, your atoms begin to drift apart, no longer enslaved to keeping up human form. The interacting pieces that once constructed your body begin to unravel like a sweater, each thread spiraling off in a different direction. Following your last breath, 1,000 trillion atoms begin to blend into the earth around you. As your human body degrades, your atoms become incorporated into a new constellation, the leaf of a staghorn fern, a speckled small shell, a kernel of maize, a beetle's mandible, a partridge's tail feather. But those atoms still keep the essence of you in their new arrangements. So you're not gone, you're simply taking on different forms. Instead of your gestures being the rising of an eyebrow or the blown kiss, now a gesture might be a waving stalk of wheat, inhaling lung of a beluga whale. Sorry. I am a hospital chaplain. In that role, I have walked the final journey with others many times. I've held their hands, stroked their brows, sang songs, anointed them with oil. It is a sacred time, a time we have prepared our whole lives for. I have sat at the bedside with families and friends as they told stories about their loved ones and joined in their laughter and tears. Sometimes, though, I'm the only person in the room as someone dies, the only one here bearing witness to this most profound of life's moments. For some, death comes as a freedom from long suffering and pain. For others, it is unexpected and swift. And yet for others, it comes as a peaceful end to a life well lived. But what I have seen is that for the dying person, death is a personal, silent passage. That last breath, that final heartbeat is a still, poignant, and altogether spiritual. But it's not just our own deaths that we must face. It's the death of our loved ones, the loss of them in our lives. We grieve, we mourn. Death is more than someone's final journey. It is a communal event affecting all those who remain on earth. Grief and mourning are integral to the entire experience of death. Rituals about mourning and ceremonies are meant to bring people together, to take the hands of those mourning the loss and lead them away from isolation. Yet, death rituals are nearly non-existent in the United States, and death ceremonies often consist of a wake, a funeral, a memorial service, and then, well, nothing. In earlier, simpler times, and this still happens in some traditions in other countries, funerals were a community affair. Families bathed the bodies at home after they passed, laid them out on a bed and invited folks over, held religious ceremonies, planned the burial of their loved ones with the local religious leader. But in modern society, no sooner have our loved ones been declared dead than they are whisked away, refrigerated, treated, and if being prepared for an open casket, covered in makeup, given plumping treatments for sunken eyes, and have their mouths stitched up. Death and dying used to be a topic of open and ongoing conversation. People planned for their deaths. In many cases, there was no ambiguity as to what the person wanted or what was expected of the family. The family knew in advance what type of coffin the dying wanted, where they wanted to be buried, what they wanted to wear. And women, they sometimes made their own shroud and would include them in their wedding dowry. Over time, more and more families called in doctors and science in place of priests and religion. And with this shift came a focus in combating death and even beating it. There is an entire profession dedicated to halting the dying process, as if we think we could accomplish the impossible, to cure death. Many non-Western cultures have maintained their grief rituals and death ceremonies, allowing for long-term grief, making death a part of life, and so much more. In Japanese, Buddhist, and Shinto traditions, the family is near at the time of death. A close relative wets the lips of the deceased, giving the body its last taste of water. Family members then take part in ceremonial and practical washing of the deceased's body. In Bali, the cremation ceremony, Namen, is considered to be the most important ceremony in a Balinese life, setting the soul free. There is much celebration at this time. A cremation is an occasion for gaiety, not for mourning, since it represents the accomplishment of the most sacred duties to liberate the souls of the dead. At the hospital, I see people on their last day, sometimes their last hour. But I'm also a certified end-of-life doula. That means that I help people in their transition into death. Just as a birth doula assists in bringing life into this world, a death doula assists in transitioning out of it. While the two roles share some aspects, a death doula is different from a chaplain. In essence, a death doula's job is to help someone have a good death. What's a good death? Well, the British Medical Journal identified some common components of a good death: pain management, clear decision-making, preparation, completion, and affirmation of the whole person. A death doula's work ranges from logistical planning for the time before, during, and after death, conducting rituals or comforting practices, helping the dying person reflect on their lives and values, explaining to caregivers what to physically expect when someone is dying. The doula also helps a person decide on whether they want a traditional burial or cremation or any of the other green burial options. I won't go into the specifics, the different kinds of green burial here, but let me know if you want to hear more, and I can talk. The doula also helps people plan their environments for the transition. Who would they like at their bedside? Do they want special music? Would they like someone to sing or chant or read poetry? Do they want particular prayers in the presence of their spiritual leader? Do they want to be in a special place at home? Do they want their pets present? A death doula brings the topic of death and dying out of the shadows and allows people to talk about it. There is a growing movement called the Death Cafe, where people come together to talk about their feelings and attitudes and beliefs about death. It began in Switzerland, with death cafes being offered in France, the UK, and now in the US. Its purpose is to increase awareness of death with a view of helping people make the most of their finite lives. At a death cafe, a volunteer host serves food and beverages, often in someone's home, and invites people to share their feelings and experiences around death. The organizers of these events say that there is a growing sense of yearning for the days when death was treated as part of life, rather than something that needed to be tidied up as quickly and neatly as possible. They say that people do want to talk about death. So let's start talking about it. I encourage you to engage your loved ones in a conversation about death, to express your feelings about your death and theirs, to share any grief that you have. Include your children in an age-appropriate way. And I encourage you to make a plan and tell someone how you would like to be treated at the time of transition and how you would like to be remembered. I want to close today with these same words, and I may cry. There are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when the body is consigned to the grave. The third is that moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. So say their names and let's keep talking about it. Blessed be. So please join us in singing our closing hymn. I invite you now to cross your hands over your heart, and for those at home, to reach out to the ones you share space with and hear these words of benediction. Without darkness, there cannot be light. Without death, there cannot be life. Without silence, there cannot be music. Without sorrow, there cannot be joy. Let the darkness inspire us to be radiantly alive today. Blessed be.